Alright, so now we're at the part of the game that is probably, I would say, the most important part of Ness's journey, I would say. Just overall in general, because this is where one could say that Ness, at least for himself, makes his true... This is where he has his true personal inner awakening, I guess you could say. The personal, literal discovery of his powers, his inner self, and everything. Before we get into all that, I guess, is that we got here, we found the 8 melodies, the 8 places of power, and then Ness seems to fall unconscious after hearing the full tune that was made from all these 8 power places with the sound stone. But first, I'll show you the clips just as I have for all these other times. I'll show you the big parts. I think this time I'm going to show just one part specifically and then talk about that. And then after doing that talking, I'll go to the next big part, because there's a lot of stuff that happens between those points. So I'll show you the clip, and then I'll talk about that, and then I'll show you the next clip, and I'll talk about that. Alright, so I first wanted to say that I don't know why. I mean, I kind of know why, but for some reason, as I've been making these videos, as I've gotten farther into the series, I guess you could say, I've almost become more reluctant to start making the videos, or doing at least this part, which for me is the hardest, but also the most interesting, I guess, is the talking part. The actual content of it, basically. I don't know, I've become more reluctant to do it as I've gotten farther in with the progress of the game, I guess, but I think that mostly comes down to kind of like the fact that I know that we're getting closer to the end, at least for this game, but as well that as we get closer to the end, the kind of, I guess you could say, the topic gets a little bit more important, if you want to put it that way, I guess, and it also becomes more personally emotional to me in a way. Like, these are obviously the parts where I get the most feelings of emotion or whatever when I get to this parts, and to me that means that it is important, to me at least, and it kind of gives me the, I don't want to say pressure or whatever, but just kind of like, I want it to come out well, what I'm trying to say for these parts, because I think they have a lot of meaning to them. And, it just makes it more difficult to start when you have a little bit more pressure compared to some of the other topics where I think that they have some interesting stuff, but I don't think they're nearly as important, even though I don't like to use that word, as these parts. As well as the videos, the topic matter gets longer to talk about. It's just a little bit more fatiguing, I guess you could say, trying to keep yourself coherent throughout the entire thing that you're trying to get through, even if you do it in small sections or whatever, like I did with the Soundstone one. But anyway, besides that, so we see that Ness, after going unconscious, he seems to have this vision, which, as I was talking about in the Soundstone video, this vision is all of those, every time that you went to one of these, your sanctuary, your places of power, you saw this short, or at least you were told that Ness saw this short vision, or remembered something, or sensed something that would suggest it was something when he was like a baby or whatever, or when he was first remembered being a baby, I guess you could say. You could almost get some meaning from that in a way, like, what is this, when his true self or his soul, is this the moment, almost, is this the moment that his true self finally started to interface or connect with the meat suit or whatever, the just like people have brought up the idea that we are not born with our connection to our soul or whatever. Your physical body is not born with the connection to the soul, but it is later, just at least for me in my personal experience or whatever, is that I really don't remember almost anything from, like, I remember some things, like, they're kind of blurry. I remember some really weird things, or some really specific memories when I was quite young, maybe like 3 or 4, maybe somewhere around there. But before that, like when I was, I guess even more a baby, like even more young, I have absolutely no recollection at all of any events that might have happened. Maybe I have like one, maybe, but that could have been wrong. That could have been later as well, that one that I'm specifically thinking of. And apparently some people have, at least from what I've heard, some people have memories which are much more, early in their childhood or whatever, much more early when they were like, Some of them might even remember when they came out of the womb. Like, they actually remember that event. But me personally, I certainly don't remember that. So if we're going by this, then for me, my soul or my true self or whatever only connected with this body when I was maybe like, I don't remember the exact moment that it happened, but I do remember when, to a degree, when recollection started to happen that I recall, at least. And it was maybe about like 3, maybe 3, 4 years old or something like that. But at least besides that, in Ness's case, that's what I would almost see this as, is that why it is so significant to Ness that this is going through all of his sanctuary locations. These recollections are when he was in this moment, this snapshot moment of when his parents, his mom and dad, are over his crib or whatever. I guess, I don't know how old he was supposed to be in this, but clearly very young, as a baby. This is when possibly he connected with his body, with his avatar. And that's maybe why there is some significance. And it's interesting that it is represented in him looking over himself. Like, actually, what is going on in this scene is that him viewing over himself, as we have probably had happen many times. At least for me, that has happened many times, at least when you're, like, dreaming. You often have the perspective of a third person, or whatever the term would be. You're like, a third person perspective, not a first person, like, viewing from your eyes like you normally do when you are awake, but instead viewing yourself from far away or from above or something else like that, like viewing yourself as a character in a way. You know, one could interpret that as your soul or your true self, your higher being, viewing yourself, I guess, kind of like in the movie, Miracle on 34th Street, where the angel is helping the guy who said he wished he didn't existed or something like that. It would have been better. But anyway, his guardian angel or whatever, the angels, the stars or whatever, are viewing him from, high up above, from the heavens or whatever. And we can almost see that as when we're viewing ourselves in our dreams, kind of like that, us viewing ourselves from above. And this is, I think, exactly what's happening here. Almost like, I don't know, maybe this is the process of when your soul or whatever your higher self chooses an avatar or something like that. They actually kind of like window shopping or browsing almost. And then they kind of say, all right, I do choose this one or something like that. And then they at that moment, they become conscious or whatever. They become one with they connect with the avatar in that moment or something like that. That's just how I'm viewing this. And this is going on way too long, but I think it is important, is that it's interesting that this moment, in that regard, is what, seeing this, is what, becoming conscious of this, I guess, or remembering this, is what brings Ness to Magicant, or it is what, in this moment, creates this world of his. This is what allows him, this moment is what allows him to get here. Alright, well, since I went through that, I'm going to now show you the full part of Magicant, which is going to be, somewhat long, but not super long. The gameplay part of that, and then I'm going to talk about that in even more detail. So, I'll see you then. Alright, so we are now finally in Magicant. As you can see, it's a pretty strange place. But what I wanted to mention that I should have mentioned in the last part was I was going to talk a little bit about the Soundstone, like I promised, or whatever I promised I said I would talk about at some point many episodes ago. So I initially thought that the Soundstone in Buzz's prophecy that he gives, I initially thought that the Soundstone was actually referenced when he said the shattering of the Nightmare Rock. And while I still might have that interpretation, I could see that being somewhat accurate, possibly. After reading a little bit into the guy, the translator, Tomato's detailed, I guess you could say, breakdown of Earthbound compared to Mother 2 in terms of its translation differences. It was actually called the Nightmare Boulder in Mother, where instead of in this, it's a Nightmare Rock, which would make you think like, okay, a rock is like something that could be like pretty tiny, but a boulder is obviously something much larger, so it's like, alright, the Soundstone is probably not a Nightmare Boulder, but it might more be in relation to something later on in the game, at the last part of the game, basically, where this guy, I guess, entity is hiding, I guess you could say, its lair, pretty much. One could say that it's the rocky formation could be like a Nightmare Boulder instead of a rock. So, yeah, the Soundstone might not be this. The reason I thought that is because in Magicant, the final thing that you see, which you have already seen, but I will talk about later, is called Ness's Nightmare. But this was actually just translation censoring religious themes and stuff like that for Nintendo of America. So in Mother 2, it was actually called Ness's Demon or Ness's Devil, not Ness's Nightmare. So I kind of thought like, oh, well, Nightmare Rock, maybe the Soundstone was the thing that brought you here, like it was the nightmare almost. So that, it might have some interpretation that can be made there, but it's probably not what the Soundstone is. But anyway, the Soundstone does, in the end, disintegrates, or it disappears completely, like it goes away after Ness gets through this Magicant, his world. So, could have some relation in some way, who knows? Because one could say it's like a dream. A dream is pretty close to a nightmare as well. It's, it's a very fine line between those to some degree. But, yeah, it's interesting that using this Soundstone to record these melodies, these memories almost, is what is able to enable Ness to finally see or finally create this world of his own, Magicant. But yeah, anyway, as you've seen, it's a very strange place. And one other thing that is very obvious from between Mother 2 and Earthbound difference here is that they censored it because in America, nudity is not as accepted, I guess you could say. Like, blatant nudity is not as accepted as it is in Japan. So basically, in Mother 2, Ness is not in his pajamas. He is just straight up his sprite, his body. He's fully naked besides his red cap that he has. Whereas Nintendo America wouldn't stand for that, so they changed it to his pajama sprite instead. Which, I think being naked, at least in Japan, that means, or that is often I guess you could say, a cliche when somebody's going through one of these kind of metaphysical finding themselves things or sequences, is that they're generally portrayed as, like, naked. So yeah, it makes sense. And I think it would make sense in general. Like, obviously you don't really look at clothing as something that, I don't know, that is a part of you. It is just kind of a thing that you wear to keep warm and to have the outside be socially acceptable kind of thing. So yeah, that's a big difference in this way with Magicant in Japan and America. It's also interesting that throughout Magicant, I'll just talk about this now to get it out of the way, is that so there's all this like vegetation and stuff, but a lot of it is just straight up like giant like vegetables. Like it's not like just grass and trees. It's like vegetables, tomatoes, carrots, whatever, like maybe even apples. Is probably tomatoes, but it made me think of the video Danny made where he mentioned something about money being like, you know, the reason that money has like any value is because of the blood, sweat, labor, tears, all that gets put into it, and then these parasitic creatures, they have that money have some kind of, you know, ritualistic symbols on it and stuff like that that might actually cause it to be a literal form of energy to these beings in some way with that blood, sweat, labor, and tears that is put into earning it. But just on the topic of that kind of idea of parasitism in a way, is like, obviously we kind of creator beings, which we know that we are, us powerful creator beings that are here in this realm and everything. We know that our consciousness, our energy or whatever has massive value to it or whatever. It has, you know, and you could even say that like almost a nourishment characteristic to it, potentially, to these kind of parasitic creatures or whatever, these parasitic entities. And at least it made me think of, when he mentioned that, I was like, huh. And then somebody, I might have brought it up or something, almost like, you know, one could almost look at the events that happen, or that they make up or whatever, that these orchestrated events, as almost like since they harvest so much energy from it, obviously, it could almost be viewed as them like, kind of like a farmer rotating their crops in a way, like every few years, decades, whatever, they'll have to rotate their crops for the most effective farming or of sucking of that energy. And it just made me think of this part in Magicant with all the vegetables and stuff, like, is, you know, our consciousness used in that way, and they almost could view us like in this kind of that image where our consciousness, ourselves or something like that, is not so much, you know, even a avatar or whatever. It's more of like a source of a food source in a way. The only way that they could survive is through that kind of energy sucking, possibly. And seeing these fruit, these vegetables and stuff, is like, you know, us creator beings, almost them trying to harvest those forms of energy in a way, those foods, that nourishment from us in some way, by doing this stuff to try and get us to make these things or give off these energies and stuff that they can be parasites to or something. Just a little detail that, while it makes the plays look more wacky and stuff, it just made me think of that. Like, it's weird, like, that in your land, in your world here, in your consciousness or whatever, there is a representation of these vegetables, these things of nourishment, these crops, almost as if something that some entity can try to suck from or harvest in some way for their own use, their own necessary needs. But yeah, besides that little sidebar. So, okay, we are in Magicant, and it is obviously this extremely strange place, and as the Star Master here says, you created Magicant, the realm of your mind. There's beauty, kindness, sorrow, and hatred. Of course, there's an evil and violent side of you. The Sea of Eden sits at the center of those feelings. It takes you to the truth about yourself. And, he just tells you exactly what you have to do here, but he basically summarizes what Magicant is. It is a realm that you have literally created from your own self, and it has all of your deeper feelings, all like everything good, bad, the good, bad, every part of you is here on full display that you can see, basically. And in the center is the core of yourself, where you can find the truth about yourself, not just what is hidden from with your ego or your super ego or whatever. Just you could find the real truth about yourself, that which was previously hidden from you, from your own body or whatever, from your own self in a way beforehand, before you got to this point. But as you can see, as you go through Magicant, you just basically see everything that you've seen almost up to this point. Your family, your mother, your sister, your dog, just like every part of Ness's being, or his memories and everything, just everything that he's encountered, every person. And, even the guy, Everdread, you see him, but then he disappears, just, going even more to that conclusion that, yeah, he's dead. He's not, he didn't just go away, he's dead. And as you get past this little section, you actually start seeing those quote-unquote bad sides, or the bad memories, maybe, or the, evil sections in some degree. They're not harming you, they're just kind of like, hey, you remember beating these guys, and they still don't really like you, even though they're here, like. And then you actually see your younger self, which is interesting. Like, one could almost say you are completely different as you progress, because, as I've already made the point so many times, that time doesn't exist, or time is not what we are told it is, or whatever. It is a construct. Like, every day or whatever, as you learn, as you go through your journey and everything, you are literally not the same person or the same being you were the previous day or whatever, the previous part of your life, your experience. Like, him as a kid, just like we were as kids before we started learning about these things or whatever, we started growing up, we could look at ourselves back then and disconnect from it completely, because to a extent, or maybe literally, you are not that same person that you were. You are a completely different person or different entity now after that. They're two different things. They're not the same. Even though they might have the same straw man and look the same in some way, or look a little bit the same, they really aren't, possibly. Now, this guy's interesting in the hotel. Please rest. The dream you'll have here is a dream within a dream. Oh, after I read that, it's a dream within a dream. Like, that's an interesting thing. Just, kind of what we view this place being, this reality being like a dream within a dream, or something of that sort. Your heart knows things you aren't aware of. Well, that is obviously completely true. There's much that is hidden from our conscious meat brain, or our conscious awakeful mind, or whatever, or our thoughts, that is truly hidden behind something, potentially purposefully or not. But there's obviously something deep within that tells us much more about us, or that knows much more than we do on a conscious or a wakeful mind level, if you'll go by that. I don't want to use consciousness interchangeably here. It's a much different thing. And then you talk to a bunch of these young kids that are up in a, doing whatever. And what this one girl says, fresh. And it doesn't really make sense, but in Japan at least, she says, pervert because you're naked. So that makes a lot more sense. Then this rabbit says, I don't know why there's so many rabbits here. It's kind of weird, but I'd like you to take your time because this country, and in Japan or in the Japanese translation, it actually says something more along the lines of realm or land, but same deal. This country, this realm will disappear when you wake up. So, foreshadowing on that, I guess you could say. Obviously, this place is temporary once you finally get through this exploring of yourself. And you see Pokey, and I don't know if this is supposed to be a representation of what Pokey actually feels, or how Ness actually looks at Pokey as, Ness does not dislike Pokey. He actually views him as a friend in a way, a good friend, even after all that he has done. Which, wow. Pokey's done some pretty messed up stuff, so gotta give Ness that, I guess. And you see Buzz's tombstone. And then you get these guys, the Flying Man. I am your courage. And you could actually, they die pretty quickly in combat, but you could actually, I didn't do this because I was lazy, but you can get all of them, and each one that dies, if you go back to the Flying Man shack here, there's a gravestone for each one, and I think you get almost all of them killed, basically, but yeah, it's interesting that they reference themselves as literally your courage. And in Japan, the Star Master, as you get to this point, he actually says the Sea of Eden is filled with the ultimate wisdom. Because in Japan, the Apple of Enlightenment was called the Apple of Wisdom. I don't know why they changed it, but I think I like Enlightenment better, but they did have some inconsistencies when they named certain things or talked about certain things due to that. So, in Japan, I kind of prefer the sea is filled with the ultimate wisdom over the ultimate intelligence. Like, I don't know, intelligence is such a stupid word, or I don't know. To me, I've tried to disconnect from the whole thought brain thing, and intelligence usually goes with it. If you're intelligent, doesn't mean that you actually have any wisdom. That's how I look at it. So, I would see this as the Sea of Eden is filled with the ultimate wisdom. You can't go there unless you're truly ready. It's a place where you can touch the truth of the universe. And in Japan, they have at the end for just a moment or something, like a brief moment. And this alludes to basically what the Talking Rock said in The Lost Underworld, where your and the universe's destinies or fates will overlap to a degree. And in this sense, when Ness defeats his nightmare, his evil, his demon, his inner evil, when he defeats this, during that part, for that moment, he touches the truth of the universe for that moment. And he has complete clarity. Going there may bring sorrow. Now, when you cross over into this next section, it doesn't have, I don't know if it has a name, this area specifically. It might, but at least when I looked into the soundtrack of the game, it popped out to me that the name that was given for this particular soundtrack that plays here is, and it's a very good soundtrack, by the way. The entire soundtrack is amazing, but this particular one is a very good soundtrack for this part. So, yeah, it is. The theme actually changes to, it's called Deeper, somebody named it Deeper into the Subconscious, which I find very interesting because this is where Ness gets out of the part of Magicant where it's mostly, not hostile or not, it's memories in a way. It's all of his memories, kind of stuff that you could probably dig out of yourself, like remember these things if you were consciously, don't want to use the word, if you are thinking about it, or whatever, you can imagine it or whatever, you can remember. But here in the deeper into the subconscious is where the enemies start to spawn, and there's pretty much nobody else to talk to. So everything is just the quote-unquote the evil parts of his mind starting to embody themselves. And to get through this section is necessary, but, it's just interesting because for a lot of people, unless they do a lot of self-reflection, they don't know or they can't realize or see the demons of themselves, the evil parts of themselves. In their wakeful mind, in their wakeful thoughts, they usually cannot see within themselves the evil that is there, the badness or whatever, the negative side of themselves. But until you get to the subconscious part of your mind, the not wakeful mind, the part that is something you don't appear to have, at least in his avatar, direct control over and direct influence over in a way, is when you finally start seeing those negatives, those evil parts of yourself. And that's what is kind of happening here with this section deeper into the subconscious, and you actually have a small conversation with yourself again, giving you this baseball cap, which is useless at this point as a defense item, but hey, it's cute, I guess. And it's also kind of weird that the adult side of himself, or whatever you want to say, the most recent side of himself, is only seen here in the subconscious, whereas the child part of himself that he probably remembers is in his not as subconscious or whatever, the more wakeful part of his mind. And yeah, the enemies are very weird here. A lot of them are references to stuff from Mother 1. But definitely just weird, abstract kind of enemies. I can't really derive much meaning from most of them. But when you finally get to the center of this section, this deeper into the subconscious, you find this weird horn-looking thing coming from the ground. And when you check it, it brings you to the next part, which is as well interesting as the Star Master said, is called the Sea of Eden, and the soundtrack here is called the Sea of Eden. And I wanted to bring up that just that term is obviously probably brings up a lot for people, just the term Eden. I looked up the internet definition just to get an idea of what it might mean besides just the Garden of Eden, but it just kind of spoke to me. I was like, this name obviously has importance to it. And, from the definitions or whatever online, it was like, alright, Old Testament also called Garden of Eden, a garden in which Adam and Eve were placed at the creation of life or whatever, at their creation, which you could, as Catholics or whatever have been doing, they could have 10 billion interpretations of what the Garden of Eden is and all that stuff and what its meaning is, its purpose. Basically in that context, the origination of life or whatever, as well as where if you're going by that, where the first sin of man originated from. So the Garden of Eden, while it was a paradise, at the same time it was the place that sin first originated from in that context. So it's interesting that in the Sea of Eden as well. This is where the evil side of Ness is also. And as well as other evil parts, such as all the Krakens in here. The memories of Krakens from when he fought that. But the Eden also meaning a delightful place, region, dwelling, paradise. A state of great delight, happiness, or contentment, bliss. A place of pristine or abundant natural beauty. And yeah, that's, pretty, I would say, good terms or interesting terms to give to Eden in a way. And calling this the Sea of Eden, it's a very pretty, interesting looking place besides all the enemies. Very mysterious in a way. But then you finally get to the center of the Sea of Eden here, and you see what you have seen throughout the game before, the Mani Mani statue, a Mani Mani statue, which is not a coincidence at all, obviously, because it has been for the whole journey has been a representation of people's evils in a way, the evil part of them. And we are now seeing it in the center of his deeper mind, his subconscious. It is here, and I don't like how this is translated in English compared to Japanese. So, what the Mani Mani statue says in Japanese is, it's more like, I am the evil in your heart, not the I'm the evil part of your brain. I am the evil in your heart, which speaks much better, in my opinion, than in this context than the evil in the evil part of your brain. This is, I am the evil in your heart, which is much more related to, I guess, the soul than the brain or whatever. Taking that into context. I am the evil in your heart. You cannot beat me because you are the one who forced me into being. Now, that is a very profound and concise thing to say because, we obviously talk about that a lot, is that I wouldn't say you cannot beat me because you do beat him, but he says that, or it says that because you are the one who forced me into being, is that you, the creator being yourself, you made me what I am. You have put me into existence. Without you, I would not be here. There would not be this evil part of you without you making me into what it is, the evil part. And as I said before, when you fight him, in the English version, it is called Ness's Nightmare, but in the Japanese version, it is called, not censored or whatever you could say, Ness's Demon, or it could be translated to Ness's Demon or Ness's Devil, or whatever, like the more, much more accurate saying. It's not like something that he is afraid of, but it is, to it as well. But it is the evil part of him, which is, to me, much different than a nightmare. It is all the evil within yourself. It is a representation of that. And I noted this down because I thought it could be interesting, is that, so, the Mani Mani statue shows up in Magicant, and at least it is the physical manifestation that Ness's evil side, the evil within his heart, shows up as. One could say that the Mani Mani statue being there is just to say, the reality, as we said, is a reflection of ourself, and the evil part of Ness is actually the cause of the evil he is seeing in his reality outside of Magicant. Just in his reality, the evil he is seeing is a reflection of the evil within himself, or the evil that is there in the world is a reflection of the evil within himself. And when he gets through this area, the only after removing this evil part of himself, conquering it, does he gain the power to truly, completely remove the evil reflection of that world he has created, that being Gygas in a way, and all that, just a little interpretation there that I noted down. Because at least it is said that in the Japanese version, it says something that it is impossible to defeat Gygas until you basically you find yourself and go to Magicant and conquer this part of you. Which, I can see that. Like, the only way to remove the evil from this realm that we see, that we almost create, is to remove it from ourselves, because that reality is a reflection of ourselves. And yeah, sorry, another thing to get out of the way, as I noted it down, is, as I said before, the Apple of Enlightenment in the US is actually, in Japan, called the Apple of Wisdom, which, both are a good name, I say, but the Apple of Wisdom is more consistent. And when you get later on and you actually fight Gygas, or it might be mentioned even earlier than this, is that it's never mentioned in the US version, is the Apple of Enlightenment is actually apparently a machine that Gygas is in possession of. So Gygas possesses the machine that gives out these prophecies or whatever, these destinies, gives out this information, and obviously didn't like it, which is, I'll probably go on to this another time. It's kind of hilarious. Like, the downfall of Gygas in the end was that he did as people would say with destiny, they don't seem to realize that if you try to change destiny, is that you doing that was the destiny, was to do that. Like, trying to say that I'm going to change destiny or whatever. Well, when you're doing that, you're also doing exactly what the destiny predicted or whatever, because in the end result, the end result is going to be exactly what it was. Like, whatever you do, I guess, is that the destiny would still be fulfilled, which happens here. He went through all this work to try and stop you, and he actually, in some ways, like with the base bringing all the people together, abducting them, actually is what made the phase distorter later on, the time travel machine, to be created by Dr. Andonuts, the Apple Kid, and the Mr. Saturns putting their creative ability together. So Gygas made his own fall in that regard, and somehow owning this device that shows destiny or whatever. But yeah, just a note difference between the English and Japanese. Kind of an interesting difference. Doesn't matter that much though. But anyway, when you finally defeat Ness's demon, Ness's evil side, you start to... Ness heard a familiar voice at the center of the Sea of Eden. Gygas' goal is to destroy you. Listen carefully. Which is his own voice. Everything in the universe, there's a typo there, which I never noticed, but the guy mentioned universe, missed the I. Everything in the universe could be destroyed at the hands of Gygas. But he and his followers are also in trouble. The Apple of Wisdom has foretold that Gygas' attempt will fail. It's because the existence of a boy named Ness. That's me. So yeah, he's hearing his own inner voice, his own self. This part. Free your mind and know what you must do. In all caps, know what you must do. And I think we obviously talk about that a lot in this community, kind of, is that free your mind from the shackles of this place and the ideas that there's some kind of restriction to your knowledge or your ability to know things in some way. Free your mind and know what you must do. Is that know with all your confidence, with all your heart, with every part of you, completely with confidence, without any doubt at all, know what you must do. know what you are in that way. Know what you are, know what you have always been, know what you must do, know your path. Your destiny has already been decided. You, I, where should we go? You know deep within the reaches of your mind. Yeah, you know. You know where you must go. You know deep down what you must do. It is not something, is when you feel that gut feeling, people call it. When you doubt yourself, you are doubting the true knowledge that you have, that is being communicated from your true self, that knows these things for certain. And we've always known these things, but we have suppressed them with doubt of the avatar, the physical reality game here. Saturn Valley, you'll get something new there, which in this case is the phase distorter that'll be made. Soon Magicant will be no more, we must be quick. Ness really heard his own voice. Go to Saturn Valley. Go to Saturn Valley now. And it's like being able to hear your own self when people say that at least some people say that they've actually heard from or whatever their true self, like literally or whatever. I think we all do that to a degree. We just might not realize it. Like we don't give it the credit that it deserves or the credit that it should have when we hear from our true self in a way. We might suppress it or ignore it or not realize it, kind of thing. But at least in this case, Ness finally heard from his true self and knew exactly what he must do and knew his power after defeating the evil part of himself, the evil that was always within him that he created after doing that. And then he powers up, literally. Ness was filled with the power of the Earth here, which is all of his sanctuary locations, in a very dramatic, climactic way. Instantly, Ness's mind cleared, and he realized that he had possessed great power. Just like we do, and we should, and we have to realize that we are great, powerful beings, that we have immense, almost, one could say, unlimited power. But him realizing that, at that moment, Ness's psychic powers radically expanded. I wouldn't even say psychic, I would say Ness's powers radically expanded. And then you get massive, insane stat boost from all that, and you finally learn how to use the better teleport spell. Ness made all of the hidden powers his own, which, as I said, we have to do as well. All of those hidden powers that we do possess, we have to make them our own, or we will make them our own. That's what we should look at it as. We will make them our own, because they've always been there and we've always known them. Ness absorbed the power of the land into his heart, and Magicant was no more. And then he goes through this very interesting, you can wake up. Now you can wake up. Your friends are waiting for you. It's time to get up. Goes through all of the sanctuary locations. Then he finally gets back to himself, I guess you could say, his body. The soundstone that Ness used to have is now gone. That's why I considered the shattering of the nightmare rock. And it could mean that too. I still have that on the table, and I think it makes some sense that it meant so much, and it was so important that he got through Magicant, that he defeated his inner demons, and he realized his true potential and his true self. And then the soundstone, it shatters, it goes away, it's gone. And then he finally gets up from his coma, which, who knows how long it was. And all of his friends are like, hey, what should we do now? What's up? You alright? And then they do exactly that. They teleport to Saturn Valley to go on to the very final sections of the game. But yeah, after that very important part of the game and very important section, like, potentially at least for me to a degree, like, I would say it's one of the most, after I kind of have thought about it, it's probably the most memorable, like, almost, I'm sure I know other games have done this as well, I'm sure. I don't really know them specifically, but I think this one probably did one of the best kind of ways of representing this in a way, just like it does so many other amazing things, like even the final boss, like people would say, of Gygas, they would almost say that is the most memorable part of this game. But for me, when I really look at it, I would say that something like Magicant is probably more. And I would say that defeating Gygas in the end really wasn't... I'm obviously going to get to that later, but while it is the end goal of his quest or whatever here, is that I think really the most important part for Ness was going through Magicant, defeating his inner evil, and realizing his true self. That's how I would look at that, at least. And it's interesting because him doing that leads to him defeating the embodiment of evil within the realm, the quote-unquote reality of Gygas. So him having to do that was the most important step to being able to actually accomplish that part of him mastering himself or realizing his true power, and all this was the requirement for him to do the same and defeat that evil, that force within the reality that his avatar embody, or his avatar lives in, his avatar is a part of. Just like I would say the same that can be said for ourselves. But yeah, anyway, after that, I think that's actually going to, after editing, probably be longer than the last Soundstone one, but I think it was very important to be that long, kind of. Maybe I'm just not good at being concise, but yeah. The next video, I'm probably going to get on to the next section. I'll have to see. I don't know exactly what I'm going to have for the next video, exactly what I'm going to talk about next, but I don't think I'm going to tie up loose ends. I'll probably do that even after that, so I'll probably will get on to going to the final area of the game and confronting Gygas and everything involving that, which could be just as long as this, who knows, but I don't know. But yeah, anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.